They called it a welfare system, a public health measure, a necessary arrangement to maintain order within the most powerful empire the world had ever built. Britain, the nation that gave the world parliament, the abolition of slavery, the Geneva Convention. The nation that stood in pulpits and parliament halls and told the world it was civilizing the East. That nation built a licensed, government-regulated, medically inspected sex trafficking system and ran it for decades across colonial India, Burma, and beyond. And almost nobody knows it happened. Not because the records were destroyed, because they were filed, stamped, archived, signed by officers, approved by administrators, reviewed by surgeons, and then quietly buried under 130 years of imperial mythology. This is not a story about a few rogue soldiers. This is a story about a system, a policy, a program with budgets, registration forms, medical inspection schedules, and licensing fees paid to the British Crown. In the 1860s, the British Army in India had a problem. Venereal disease was spreading through the ranks at a rate that alarmed military commanders. Their solution was not to stop the behavior. Their solution was to regulate it. In 1864, the British government passed the Contagious Diseases Acts. On the surface, these were public health laws. Beneath the surface, they were the legal architecture for state-managed prostitution, enforced first in Britain, then exported across the empire. In India, the system was called the Lal Bazaar, regimental brothels, built inside British military cantonments, walled, gated, numbered, staffed with Indian women who had been recruited, often under false pretenses, from the poorest rural villages in the subcontinent. They were told they were being hired as domestic workers. They were told they would earn wages. They were told they would return home. Some of them were teenagers. Once inside the cantonment, the process was immediate and institutional. They were registered, given a number, assigned to a structure, a small stone room with a rope bed, a clay pot, and a door that did not lock from the inside. They were medically inspected, not for their welfare, for the welfare of the soldiers. British Army surgeons examined the women on a scheduled rotation to certify them free of disease. Women who failed inspection were removed from active registration. Women who passed returned to their numbered rooms. The queue of soldiers outside was managed by a sergeant with a clipboard. This was not hidden. This was not denied. It was administered. There were garrison records, payment ledgers, inspection logs, transfer orders when women were moved between cantonments, sometimes across the country, sometimes shipped to Burma, to Ceylon, to other postings across the empire. And the men at the top knew exactly what was happening, because they approved the budgets. How many women moved through this system? Historians have estimated tens of thousands across the decades the Lal Bazaar operated. Most were from the lowest economic strata of Indian society, women whose families had been pushed into desperation by colonial land taxation, by famine, by displacement. The empire that created their poverty then profited from it. And when reformers in Britain, led by a woman named Josephine Butler, finally forced a parliamentary debate, when the Contagious Diseases Acts were repealed in 1886, when the official policy was supposedly dismantled, the cantonments in India kept running, because the men on the ground simply continued what they had always done, under slightly different administrative language. The system did not collapse when the law changed. It adapted, and the women who had been brought inside the walls were not taken home. They were simply released onto the road. No apology was ever issued by the British government. No compensation was ever paid. No memorial was ever built. No official acknowledgement has ever been placed in the public record naming this as what it was: state-organized trafficking of colonized women under the full administrative authority of the British Crown. The men who ran the system retired with their pensions and their honors. The women who survived it returned to villages that often would not receive them. Their names are not in the history books. Their names are in the ledgers, filed, stamped, archived, and the archive is not fully open. Now here is what should stop you cold. When Japan's military comfort women's system was exposed to the world, and it was monstrous, it was a crime, and we have covered it fully on this page. Go and watch it right now. The international community condemned it as a war crime. Japan faced decades of diplomatic pressure, court cases, UN resolutions, public reckonings. Britain has faced none of that, and the British system ran longer. It was more formally documented. It operated under explicit government legislation. It was defended on the floor of Parliament. The only difference between the two systems, in the eyes of history, is which empire got to write the story afterward. Did you know about this? Because most people don't, and that is not an accident. This is exactly the kind of history that gets classified under administrative records rather than atrocities. The kind that gets studied in postgraduate theses rather than taught in schools. The kind that powerful nations quietly hope will remain in the archive while the statues stay standing. That is why this channel exists. If you have watched this far, you are exactly the kind of person who deserves to know what the textbooks left out. And I need to ask you something directly. Share this video right now, not later. Right now, before you scroll past. Because the only way stories like this survive, the only way they reach the people who are still being told a cleaned-up version of imperial history, is if people like you refuse to let them stay buried. Share it. Put it on your timeline. Send it to someone who needs to see it. If you knew about this, or if this happened to someone connected to your history, tell me in the comments. I want to know. Because stories like this belong to real people and real families, and your voice matters in that record. Drop a comment right now. Tell me what you know. Tell me what you want me to investigate next. If there is a hidden atrocity, a buried government crime, a covered-up massacre, an institutional betrayal that the world has not heard, drop it in the comments and I will research it and bring it to this channel. This community is how the hidden history gets told. And one more thing before you go. We have already covered the Japanese military comfort women system in full. The recruitment, the camps, the denials, the survivors who waited decades for a reckoning that never fully came. That video is on this page. Go and find it. Watch it. Because now that you have seen this, you will understand it in a completely different way. And if you want to go even deeper, check my pinned post on this page about Unit 731, Japan's secret biological warfare program, the medical experiments, the cover-up, the American deal that buried it. I have produced a full history ebook on Unit 731 with the real documented images of what happened inside those facilities. Things that were classified for decades. Things that will change how you understand what human beings in positions of power are capable of doing when they believe no one is watching. The link is in the pinned post. Get the ebook. It is one of the most powerful ways you can support this channel, so I can keep going. So I can keep pulling these stories out of the archives and putting them in front of people who deserve to know the truth. Because there are atrocities on this list that will shock you far more than anything you have seen today. And I am just getting started.